Distinguished guests, friends and colleagues, welcome to FAFO. My name is Tone Fløtten, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this breakfast on religious revival in Mali. I have to stay here because of the microphone, because we are streamed to the rest of the world. There's probably thousands of people watching us today. So this is the microphone that works on the streaming. And especially warm welcome to Professor Massa Coulibaly, who is our collaborator in the project. He is director of Great Mali, and he's also professor at the University of Bamako. A special welcome to you. The Norwegian engagement in Mali began in earnest after the severe drought in the 1980s. Several of the organizations you'll meet here today have been present in Mali since that time, and Mali is still important to Norway. The country is considered one out of 12 focus countries, and Mali is listed in the group of especially vulnerable countries, together with Haiti, Palestine, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Somalia. West Africa is also an important area to FAFO. We have researchers with special broad experience from West Africa and with long-standing experience in Mali. During the last 15 years, FAFO has carried out work for the World Bank, several projects commissioned by the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have been doing projects for the Research Council, and we have been collaborating with several NGOs, many of you present here today. Thematically, we have worked with living conditions in general, with health and nutrition in particular. We have been studying child relocation and the conflict in northern Mali. In some of the latest projects, we've had the honor of working together with Great Mali. We find this collaboration very fruitful, and we're happy that we have such a good collaboration with you. And today, we will discuss a project, the result from a project on religious revival, very many R's, in southern Mali. We are very proud of hosting this meeting, both because the question of religious reorientation is important in itself, and because we have managed to gather such a prominent list of speakers to discuss this topic with us. My colleague Mark Taylor, who is research director here at FAFO, will chair the seminar. So I wish you again a warm welcome and good luck with the seminar.
Thanks, Tuna. My name is Mark Taylor. I'm a research director here at FAFO, and welcome to the seminar Beyond Extremism, Religious Revival in Mali, and to the launch of the last of a series of 4 reports on religious reorientation in southern Mali. The work which went into these reports was financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway, and on behalf of FAFO and on behalf of Great, we're deeply appreciative of that support. We're grateful for the financial support, and we're also grateful that ministry officials are here today and to show that they take seriously the kind of research that helps us understand the realities behind the headlines. And for a number of years now, Mali has been in the headlines. There's been a long-standing Tuareg rebellion. There's the advance of Islamist groups, the French intervention in 2012, and a peace process that's ongoing as we speak. Of course, in Mali, as in all countries affected by conflict, life goes on. It goes on behind the headlines and below the radar of international geopolitics. People get on with life. And in getting on with life, they shape the future of their country. And in southern Mali, away from the conflict zones, religion has been taking up an increasingly large part of the public space. It's a hot topic. The reports that came out of this project present findings on people's perceptions about religion, about pluralism, about politics, about the role of women's participation in public life in southern Mali. And it assesses some of the ways in which the religious scene has changed in recent years. Now, from afar, religious reorientation or revitalization among Muslims in Mali is often seen in the light of radicalization. But as you're going to hear today, it's not always so simple. Islam is not one thing, it's not homogeneous. Religious reorientation is not just political. And of course, political mobilization may not be necessarily radical. Even when it is, religious in nature. But it is a fact that Islam has become more important in the everyday lives of the people of southern Mali, and to ignore that would be to misunderstand the society and the politics of the country. So here to help us understand that story, we've 4 researchers who've worked together on this project and 4 practitioners who will comment on what they hear today. But first, we're very pleased to have with us Mr. Knut Langeland, who's the Special Envoy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Norway to the Sahel and the Maghreb. And Knut, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I was told that I should stand arm's length away from the microphone, but that should be it. It's a great honor to be here and speak at this very interesting event, Beyond Extremist Religious Revival in Mali. In the background info for this workshop, we were given information, and which has been repeated today, about Norwegian engagement in Sahel since the growth crisis in the 1980s. Our approach at that time was food security. Food security. But an important spin-off of this engagement is the impressive knowledge and expertise which has been developed in Norwegian research institutions such as Norway, FAFO, and Norwegian NGOs. We all know that the Norwegian Church Aid has been very active in Mali for the last 30 years, and it is a very well-known organization in Mali. During the 1990s and up to 2012, the Sahel was not on the highest on the international radar screen. Yet there were coups d'etats, and yet we know that there were separatist movements fighting for independence or far more autonomy or improved access to resources or political influence. This was also the case for Mali. Besides coups d'etats, we witnessed discontent in northern Mali, which was deep-rooted. Even as early as in the independent phase of Mali, end of 1950s and beginning of 1960, there were attempts to obtain political independence for northern Mali. But the French, the colonial power, said at that time no. So it didn't happen. During the 1960s and 70s, Tuareg aspirations seemed not to be on the agenda. During those years, Mali pursued another type of policy. It was very secular. It also tried to introduce some sort of African model of socialism, and it was in many ways solidly in the Eastern Bloc, if we view it from the Cold War perspective. But Tuareg aspiration resurfaced in the 1990s. Perhaps new geopolitical realities played in. During the years after 2000, democracy seemed to take root in Mali. To the extent we, the international community, talked about Mali, it was more as an example for other African countries to follow. Yet it was evident that not everything was perfect in Mali. And we could, those, I'm sure many of you who followed Mali during those years, saw that there were underlying elements which were not that favorable. We witnessed widespread corruption, growth of illicit smuggling networks, and smuggling networks were gaining ground, and so did also terrorist organizations linked to Al-Qaeda. One element we did not fully understand, which is a topic of today's seminar, was the gradual revival of Islam or Salafication of Mali. Mali, which has the pride of being a secular society, seemed to be moving in the other direction. There are different reasons for this development. We know that some countries in the Middle East funded many mosques and schools and provided social services in the absence of effective state authority. But one should also be careful not to draw a line between Salafication and jihadism, as the moderator said in his introduction. That's why we believe that this project is so important to understand what is happening in Mali. But after 2012, after the coup, which eventually failed, international attention turned to Mali and Sahel. Already by the end of 2011, there was a growing concern about the fragility in Sahel. Following the dramatic events, the ouster of Gaddafi and the insecurity which emerged after what happened in Libya. I remember quite well the surge of interest for Mali and the Sahel in New York. I was posted in New York at that time, and suddenly all the Security Council nerds gained a sudden interest for Mali. And I remember one open meeting in the Security Council where the Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs briefed about his visit to Mali. It was packed. And so that was quite interesting. The growing interest for Mali and the Sahel had also implication for Norwegian foreign policy and development policy. But the important trigger was in Amenas in 2013. Within a short time span, we decided to contribute to the, at that time, emerging UN operation in Mali. And we also decided to do more in the country. Within development cooperation, it became evident that the focus could not only be on food security. Promoting peace, good governance, and democracy became far more important. We have supported now the peace process in various ways. Some directly through international NGOs and Norwegian NGOs facilitating dialogue and reconciliation among various community groups in Mali, but also indirectly through our funding to a mechanism run by the UN Secretariat called Standby Team of Mediation Experts. And mediation experts have been in Algiers all the time. And that is something we should be proud of, because I met some of those experts last week in New York, and truly I was impressed by what they have achieved, how they played their role, making sure that any peace agreement would need the necessary ownership by Mali parties, and make sure that also a peace agreement would be doable and workable. Working with partners has been essential for Norway. We do not have an embassy in Bamako, so we rely on Norwegian Church or the Strømme-stiftelsen. Likewise, we work very closely with the UN system, where much of our bilateral development assistance is channeled. Likewise, we also work closely with like-minded or close countries like Denmark, because they have a diplomatic presence in Mali. The Norwegian government has designated Mali as one of 12 focus countries for bilateral development cooperation. It will evidently take time before that decision is translated on the ground. For the time being, we tend to work with close partners, as I just referred to, in promoting peace, stability, and sustainable development in the country. One arena which we will devote more attention is the field of education. Educating children, and in particular girls, is crucial for paving the way for a better future. Evidently, when we talk about education, a major challenge will be to facilitate, help educated young people and a growing population of young people to find jobs. We need a more conducive and business environment, more private sector development, investments, facilitate more industry, economic activity in Mali beside the traditional income generating activities. This again would require a framework conducive for such investments that again require peace, stability and good governance. Thus, the immediate task now is to ensure that peace this time will hold. We cannot allow to repeat past mistakes where parties run away from their obligation from signed peace agreements, like the Pacte National in 1992 and later on other peace agreements. In particular, the Malian government has to deliver on difficult reforms such as decentralization, let the North have more say politically, and not least ensure that the northern population clearly see a peace dividend. The armed group, either the CMA, Coordination Mouvement pour Al-Savad, or the platform, must refrain from any action which would undermine a fragile peace process. They must also join in the efforts against Al-Qaeda-linked groups. It goes without saying that stability cannot be achieved unless we are able to combat organized crime, illicit trafficking, and the corruption which facilitates such illegal activities. Crime and terror strive in conditions where there are no efficient and credible state authorities. The peace process will take time, and we will, and I'm not say hopefully, but alas, we might experience setbacks such as combats like the one we saw around Enefis in August. Fortunately, at that time, we avoided a full-scale resumption of war, but things could still go wrong in the years ahead. It could be rightly affirmed that the international community must be patient. Even when we recognize that things will take time, we must still push the parties to do what they promise and push them in the peace direction and push them towards a sustainable peace and stability and hold them accountable. That's what we plan to do in the years to come in our cooperation with Mali. I thank you for your attention.
So next up we have a presentation by three of my colleagues and Professor Mange. So could I ask all four of you to come up? We have Professor Mange Coulibaly from our partner GREAT. We have Anna Hatloy, Senior Researcher, and Tone Sommerfeld, Senior Researcher, and Kristin Gjesnes. The floor is yours. Anna,
Yes.
You're going to start us off.
I start. So thank you, Mark. The background for the project is, as Mark described, the fact that there has been a focus and fear of extremism in Mali. However, mainly focused on the northern part of the country. Most Malians are Muslims, as we all know. We found in this project that 92% of the population consider themselves as Muslims. And Islam spread in Mali with the Sufi Brotherhood in the 1800s and 1900s. The form of Islam practice in Mali is a Sufi version of Islam. The Sufism is often seen as Islam's mystical tradition, and is said to be typical of African religious practice. In the 1980s, the missionary activity from Saudi started to increase, and influenced from the East, known as Muslim brotherhoods, such as Wahhabi, Salafi, and others occurred. They have in common that they argue for an Islam without African tradition. So meaning from the Sufi version with a lot of African tradition into
into the Salafi without the traditions. Also, the militant jihadist is in the north claim Salafi affiliation. The background for our project is to see how worries about the spread of extremism and terrorism in following the conflict in the north affect the population in southern Mali. If we look into kind of maps on the internet, we will see a lot of kind of fear of extremism coming from the north. We see a lot of focus on the northern part. However, our project is focused on the southern part of Mali because the influence to see is there kind of this fear of from the north coming down southwards. And in May-June 2014, we carried out a quantitative survey covering kind of a random selective survey of households in southern Mali, meaning all regions except Tombouctou, Kidal, and Gao. It was 1,210 randomly selected households and one adult in each of the households, meaning we interviewed both a bit more women than men, but 56% women and 44% men. And we, in addition, carried out a qualitative survey in Bamako, Mopti, Ségou, Kotiala, and Sikasso, both with focus groups and interviews among religious leaders. And in addition, political leaders, other key informants, and laymen. What we are going to talk about today is that, first of all, Massa will speak a bit about the place of religion in the Malian society. Then Tone will say some words about in what ways the religious scene in southern Mali has changed during the past years. And then Kristin will talk about what are the implications for the religious revival on the future of the Malian secular state and on the religious freedom. So, Massa.
Thank you, and first of all, I do apologize for my English, which could be the worst in this distinguished room. I will show you only 7 slides. First, about group identity in Mali. It means how people consider themselves, and the knowledge of the 5 pillars of Islam, the second one. Do Muslims in Mali read Quran? And how often? The distribution of places of prayer of Muslims in Mali, supporting Islamic group, and the importance of religion in comparison to 10 years ago, and finally, mixed perception of religion, mainly of Islam in Mali. Identity group, I think the question was, which of the following statement is closer to your opinion? Do you consider yourself as being Malian, or your ethnic group, or religious? And we find that more Malian, people consider themselves more Malian than ethnic group. We have 43% against 20%. And if you compare to be Malian or to belong to his religions, we can consider that we have an equal repartition, equal distribution, because we have 25% more Malian than religion and 28% more religion than Malian, where statistically the same. But if you compare religion and ethnic group, Malian people consider themselves more religious than Islam, than ethnic group, because we have 29% more religion than ethnic, against 16% more ethnic group than religion. Can you tell us the 5 pillars of the Muslim religion? We found that people in their great majority don't know about it, because we found only 20% of people who know about the 5 pillars. But among them, only 2% can tell us in the order. So only 18% can tell all of them, but in disorder, we can say. And if you look at more carefully, we found that Muslim order know more about it than these who are only Muslim, because we have 27% against 17%. And also men know more about it than women, because we have 28% against half, 14%. We have the same, if you compare people living in urban area versus people living in rural area. We have at least 10% as the difference between the two areas. How often read Muslim people Quran? We found also usually they never read the Quran, so they don't know about it, because we found that 75% never read the Quran. So only 5% of Muslims can say that they read Quran every day. And if you compare also in terms of gender or in terms of area, we find that men read a little more than women, and people living in urban area read a little more. But what we can say here is usually people don't read. They don't read maybe because they cannot read, because they are not illiterate in Arabic, or maybe they are not so much interested in reading, just in practicing their religion. Usually, we ask in the questionnaire, usually where do Muslims pray? And we find that most of the time they pray at home. So we have only 15% of them who pray at the mosque. And among them, only 5% of women against 27% of men. And 35% of people 65 years and above, and only 8% of young people, less than 25 years. Supporting Islamic group. The question was, do you consider the following as important reason for young people to join militant Islamic group? We have the same question about for rebellion groups, but we are here interested in the reason why young people can join militant Islamic group. And the most important reason for them is first to make a living, so to earn their living for 39%, and nothing else to do, a kind of illness. So if they don't have anything to do in employment or whatever, they are reason to join Islamic, militant Islamic group. And also, we have almost 20% of young people who can join militant Islamic group for fighting, because they have been encouraged by their family or by their relative, and just to join friends in already the militant Islamic groups. Is religion more important to you than it was 10 years ago? This question is very important because after the conflict, we think that religion, mainly Islamic religion, is becoming more important, and we wanted to know if it's true or is it just an assumption for researchers. We found that nearly 2 million out of 3 think religion is more important today than it was 10 years ago. And if you compare Muslim only and Muslim belonging to Muslim order, proudness, you find that there are 72% of Muslims belonging to brotherhood, against only 65% for people considering themselves being only Muslim, 29% for people who are not, who don't consider themselves as Muslim. So we can say that religion is becoming more important for people than it was 10 years ago. Finally, for each of the following statements, can we tell us whether you agree or not? You find that most of the people find that it should be forbidden to criticize religion, or to criticize religion leaders. We have 83% or 78%, almost 80% of people who answer to the questions. Also, you find that about 60% consider that Islam should be established as a state religion in Mali, because they find that most of the people are already Muslims. So it's a view that religion, the Islamic religion can be the state religion. We also find that, and I think Stone will talk more about it, Sharia family law should be applied in Mali. And the last one is only 42%, but I think it's very important. They consider that a Muslim should not vote for non-Muslim if we have election at presidential election or deputy election. Okay, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Massa. Yes, Massa just provided us with the findings on people's perceptions, and I'm going to provide some of the context for these findings. Especially since 1991, the religious scene in Mali has been undergoing changes. And this is evident in a multiplication of religious organizations of all sorts. For instance, the formal organization of Malian associations, religious associations that formerly were informal associations as NGOs. Also foreign Muslim missionary organizations like Saudi NGOs, neighborhood groups that organize religious training, and the state-initiated High Islamic Council of Mali that has sub-councils in the regions and in the local communities. And in many communities, they have taken over some of the roles of the former Council of Elders that solve conflicts, etc. So it's sort of moreover a plethora of religious associations. It's also evident in a multiplication of religious schools, again of all sorts, an increase in media coverage of religious issues, and in the use of media for religious message, radio stations, social media, and web-based newspapers. So, as Massa points out, also sort of in the sort of public scene, Islam has become more important. And we refer to this as a form of Muslim revival. The religious revival, an increase in public religious activity, takes place across the board, that is, among all Muslims, and not only among people ascribed a label of being sort of religiously conservative. So, religious revival, in other words, is not a one-way process of radicalization or adoption of extremist views only. So what has contributed to these changes in the religious scene in Mali? It should be mentioned, first of all, that this is a process that finds its parallel in a development across the African continent, also in Christian charismatic milieux, and this is seen, for instance, in the growth of Pentecostalism, which is quite striking further south. And this more general tendency is partly a result of liberalization efforts in the case of Mali after the after the transition to democratic rule in 1991, and with it the introduction of freedom of association. It's also a result of efforts efforts to strengthen the civil society from foreign donors. It's also an issue of new media technology and the use of the web and social media for religious message, as I just mentioned. And it's a result of an increase in missionary activities from the East, especially from Saudi Arabia since the 1980s, as Massa pointed out. But again, new Sufi brotherhoods are equally active participants in the public sphere. So the sort of old and more traditional Sufi brotherhoods have been complemented by new movements that attract a lot of attention. In spite of this revival and the increase in and diversity of religious organizations, the majority of Malians in the south are not highly educated in the Quran, as Massa pointed out. And most people in Mali still consider themselves as Muslim only, that is, without affiliation to a particular Muslim brotherhood or order. And as you can see, this applies to 62% of the population in the south that we interviewed.
This diagram that you see here shows the current distribution that we found of the religious groups as it appears in our data. And the largest Muslim brotherhood that you find is a relatively new Sufi brotherhood, the Ansar Din, which is not the same as the extremist group in the north of the same name. This Ansar Din is an example of the new popular organization of Sufi brotherhoods, and it's led by Madani Haidara, who is sort of a promoter of African Islam, so a clear sort of counterpart to this Islam from the East. And he is tremendously popular, especially in urban areas, and he can draw sort of a following from enough to fill football stadiums in Bamako. And in addition, the more traditional Sufi brotherhoods are also represented here, for instance, the Tijani, the Hamalit, and the Qadariya. Then second, we have a comparatively large minority of Ahmadiyya Muslims, and along with the Shia, they're often described as a group apart from all other sort of Muslims in Mali, Sunni Muslims. And this is, as you know, the case of Ahmadiyya Muslims worldwide. Then in our data, the Wahhabi community that you see here, they make up about 4%. And as Anne Hatløy noted, the Wahhabi are often seen as a foreign Muslim denomination in Mali from the Middle East. It started growing in Bamako in the 1940s when the first students returned from university education in Egypt at the time. Only 4% in our sample proclaim such affiliation, but the Wahhabi term is sort of contested among Wahhabi. It may also be the case that people who describe themselves as Sunnite, following the Sunnah, also seek a return to sort of the original ways of the Prophet and share views with followers of Al-Wahhab. So part of the sort of Sunnite crowd here may also be sort of members of the Wahhabi community. But again, the Wahhabi community is very diverse. Now, one of the marks of the new religious revival that I want to call particular attention to is the new sort of roles of women in religious life, and that this is changing. As opposed to earlier, when it was primarily boys who were put through a more thorough education in religious issues, girls increasingly do so, and also adult women seek religious training. Partly in neighborhood-led schools, and women are also increasingly taking part in religious associations, and the number of female preachers is increasing in radio stations, for instance. And women who do take part in this way themselves describe this as a form of empowerment. So at last, they can participate in a domain that formerly was dominated by men, and where men have had sort of a better religious education. So at the same time, in southern Mali, an absolute majority of the population defend women's public participation. This is to say that neither before this religious revival nor after it do people object to women's voting or political leadership. It is with respect to the private sphere that differences between women and men are recognized sort of most explicitly. Division of labor is gendered, and household duties are considered women's responsibility. And to a large extent, both women and men in southern Mali agree to this, and this is in line not sort of only with respect to Islamic values, but also with traditional Malian values. And this is reflected in the quite widespread support of Sharia family law that Massa mentioned. A final note on women's new religious engagement. On the one hand, many women who are taking up religious studies emphasize more than other women that women belong to the domestic sphere. But at the same time, this brings them into the public sphere in a new way, as missionaries, as preachers, and as religious teachers. So, in conclusion, it's difficult to sort of state or to characterize the overall effects of these changes on women's participation. Kristin?
So what are the implications of religious revival on the Malian secular states? One emerging tendency in southern Mali is the presence of religious leaders in public political debates. And two of the most well-known religious leaders are Mahmoud Dicko, the president of the High Islamic Council of Mali, and Haidara, the leader of Ansar Din. And along with other religious leaders, these two engage in debates about the relationship between politics and religion. And one specific example of this is the debate concerning the family law in 2009, where the religious leaders mobilized parts of society against the changes in the family law. And in contrast to the politicians, the religious leaders have demonstrated great capacity to mobilize the masses around political issues. People have confidence in religious leaders, as this figure illustrates. 63% have a great deal of confidence in religious leaders and the High Islamic Council, while confidence in elected leaders and the central government is significantly lower. Also, the religious leaders speak out on a range of social problems, including corruption, crime, and participation of youth in jihadist groups in the north. This, they say, can be attributed to moral degradation, and the return to core Muslim values is therefore a solution to these problems, according to them. Hence, the religious leaders legitimize their engagement in political affairs partly with reference to a failure of politicians to govern. And this has popular support. In our survey of perceptions, 40% of the respondents consider political parties to be very or extremely corrupt. In comparison, under 5% of the respondents consider religious groups to be very or extremely corrupt. So the confidence in religious leaders is far higher than in political representatives. The increasing participation of religious leaders in the political scene implies that the principle of state secularism is reshaped. Secularity in Mali has been understood more or less as a direct reflection of the French concept of laïcité, which entails the absence of religious engagement in government affairs and the absence of government involvement in religious affairs. So, on the one side, we now observe the participation of religious leaders in the political scene, and on the other side, we observe an increased government involvement in religious affairs. And also, in an effort to distance Mali from extremist Islam, the state is seeking to control religious groupings. In 2012, a Ministry of Religious Affairs and Worship was established, and the mandate of the ministry is to regulate religious matters. And this includes the active shaping of the education of imams, control of the contents of prayers and sermons, and overseeing the educational content of the many Quranic schools in the country. And with regards to the latter, the question of how to deal with the Quranic schools will become increasingly important in Malian public debates. In the perception survey, as much as 1/3 of the population regard religious schooling as an alternative to formal schooling. And this is one of the challenges the ministry will have to deal with in the years to come. Our research also shows that religious revival in southern Mali is accompanied by a tendency of intensified social exclusion of religious minorities. The advances of extremists in the north have led to an increase in the fear of Wahhabists and other conservative religious minorities in Bamako. Some of the Sufi religious leaders seem to take advantage of this by portraying all Wahhabists, including women and children, as terrorists. And the religious leaders who are the most active in accusing all Wahhabists of being terrorists also seek and receive funding from European NGOs and state agencies for what they call interreligious communication. But there is no doubt that this interreligious dialogue excludes Wahhabists and other religious groupings. And the discourse that all Wahhabists are terrorists has led to mob violence and government crackdowns against religious minorities in southern Mali. Therefore, this tendency represents a threat to religious freedom, and it may also have an impact on reconciliation processes in Mali. Tone?
Yes. There is a lot of issues to address here, but we would like to draw attention to some policy implications for the current audience and for the debate. Firstly, the religious educational system, as Kristin pointed out, will become a sort of intensified point of contention in the coming years, and it needs scrutiny. We know little about what is being taught, and also the reasons why parents make the educational choices for their children that they do. Secondly, the influence of the religious leaders in political processes will continue to be a concern and needs to be addressed in dialogue with Malian authorities. And this is an issue of transparency that NGOs as well as government representatives should be aware of. Thirdly, the entrance of women into religious life raises new challenges that should also be addressed. But at the same time, it provides new entry points for engagement with civil society organizations that we need to think through. Fourthly, and related to what Kristin Gjesnes just said about the fear of Wahhabiyya and other religious minorities, dialogue must encompass a broader spectrum of religious organizations and leaders. And finally, leaders and members of all Muslim brotherhoods should be encouraged to address issues of religious tolerance. And with that, I give the word back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Tuna. Thanks all of you. We now have the pleasure to invite up 4 practitioners to comment on what we've just heard. We have from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Espen Lindbekk, from Norwegian Church Aid, Mariana Oppheim Sampo, from Nord Sahel, we have Holja Hogsjå, and from Strømmelstiftelsen, Øyvind Aadland. And I'll ask you all to come up here, and you can comment one by one. And with any luck, we'll have some time for questions afterwards. So if you could all take a seat here.
Hi. Hi.
So I'll give the floor first to Espen from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you, Fafo, for inviting me, and thank you, the research team, for this report. At the outset, I must say that I am no expert on Mali. You've heard Knut Langeland present the Norwegian approach. I represent the section for peace and reconciliation, and we have, in our mandate, we have research as one of our instruments, and for that I think that this morning's presentation shows exactly we need more knowledge and understanding of complex situations to draw lessons on a particular situation, but also to relate that to other situations. So I think what Fafo has done and the methodology has been very much appreciated, and the result that was presented here today. We follow, of course, the situation in Mali very closely, and as in the region, and therefore I think that the findings that we've heard today are not only interesting, but they are important for us to understand when we develop our policies, and maybe to say that from our perspective as peace and reconciliation, we see civil society engagement as critical and crucial for any type of process, and in that I think the complex understanding of religious, of the increase, what did you call it, revitalization of religious life in Mali is so important and interesting for us, because it represents, I think you mentioned new entry points, but also for that, to understand that civil society is so rich, and what you mentioned by discussions, I think that having an open and very public discussion on what this means is something that from our perspective is really, as I said, the vital civil society engagement we see in many of the processes that we are engaged in is so critical, and therefore also discussions, I noticed discussions on the extremism in itself is something that I noted and I appreciate. And at the same time, this awareness of of the more extreme, and having that balance in this very broad spectrum. So that is one element that I note and we appreciate as something that we have to further develop. The other thing is what was mentioned about women's participation, because we see from our perspective that anything we do has to have that, and then to see that your finding is that religious increased religious engagement can be seen as an empowerment is something that I have noted with a great interest, and we have already discussed that with the research team, because we find that this is something that we should probably further explore. I have in my preparation for this, I saw also that women in Mali has, as was mentioned, very strong. I even think that in 2012 it was they managed to demonstrate very clearly against the president, sort of a women rebellion, which I thought was fascinating. So from our perspective, we have no role in the peace process. You know, it's the UN and others. But we facilitate many dialogue initiatives, as Knut Langeland was mentioning, both at the national level, but also at the local level. And to see that, you know, again, just to praise the research team for their findings, I think that this represents also ways that we have to look at what to include in our dialogue initiatives, because women, religious institutions will play a critical role. And then lastly, I think I also noted that you had some important lessons on interreligious dialogue that I think we should also have put. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I'm going to go right over to Marianne, excuse me, first.
Can you hear me? First of all, thank you for FAFO for inviting NCA to this seminar. NCA, like I think you mentioned, has been in Mali for 30 years. So we know the context, and we have worked in the north mainly. So this is a context we know very well. We think this research is very important, very interesting and useful, actually, for our work. Not least in the area of interreligious dialogue, which it's an area where we work. We recognize and we see, you know, that religion is becoming much more important in the Malian society. But this research has been carried out in the south, and we think the situation is different in the north. One of the things is, when I've talked to Malians before, they've always told me, that people from the north have always told me that, you know, in the north we are pure Muslims. This is where it started. We became Muslims first. And so we are more pure Muslims than in the south. So this is something I think the southerners have kind of have this revival, but I think in the north it's different. So just wanted to say that. When it comes to Norwegian Church Aid, it's an organization which is based in the Christian faith, and our preferred partners are faith-based actors. Our new global strategy, Faith in Action, strengthens this Christian identity and also calls for an even stronger emphasis on working with faith-based actors as our partners. We believe that faith-based actors have great potential to contribute to change in society, both positive and negative change. So for NCA, it's important to support the religious actors which represent the positive forces in society, while at the same time challenge the negative forces. As I said, we have been working in northern Mali since in the 80s. And these last years, we have focused on thematic areas such as peace and reconciliation, gender-based violence, and women's participation in public life. And one key element of this work, especially in the peace work, has been to link up with religious actors or religious leaders as local resource persons, together with other key actors at local level. And they have been gathered in groups that we call équipe de personnes ressources. And these groups find peaceful solutions to local conflicts together with the involved parties through community meetings. And we have seen many examples of local conflicts being resolved by these groups. And clearly, these religious actors play important roles in those processes. They are playing an important role for various reasons, but I think they are generally respected personalities in their communities, in the society. People tend to respect religious leaders, which means that they have a moral authority. People listen to them. So, the question to me was, how do we relate to the changes in civil society and the broader diversity of Muslim organizations? And I think it's correct to say that for NCA, this trend of religious revival in Mali only strengthens our approach of working with local grassroots organizations and religious actors, including women's organizations and women's religious actors. As a faith-based organization, I think it's right to say that NCA is generally being met with respect in the Malian society. And this gives us legitimacy to work with religious actors and also address issues pertaining to the link between peace and reconciliation, between religion and society. So we see an increased role for NCA and partners in the peace and reconciliation work, which is linked to our long history of working in northern Mali, and also our approach of working with local communities and their structures, and our faith-based identity and experience working with religious actors. And in our new 5-year strategy for Mali, which we just finalized, we outline our aim to work even more closely with religious actors in the years to come. In the north, we have been able to continue working uninterruptedly throughout this whole political crisis period. And this has been possible thanks to our partnerships with local grassroots organizations, which have been able to operate normally and mobilize women's and youth groups to help the local communities throughout the crisis. We have actually seen in the north the space opening up for civil society to work during this period. I mean, we're talking about the local partners here, not the international, not NCA as such, but our partners. And because civil society in the north have become more important due to the absence of formal government and also have become more mature civil society actors. When it comes to the increased participation of women in religious structures and activities, as well as in general in public life, this is a trend which we see very clearly. And now I see that I only have 1 minute, so let's then attack the challenges and opportunities. We see actually a lot of opportunities, but also some challenges from this situation. We see that as a positive thing, that religion is becoming more important, that it's an issue that's being more discussed and reflected upon in the society. Most Malians are Muslims, and as we saw during your presentation earlier, most are not linked to one brotherhood. So there's kind of a potential for religion being a connector rather than a divider in the reconciliation process. And as long as religion is used as a positive force, and there is freedom of religion and association, we see a significant potential for religious actors to contribute to real and positive social change in the Malian society. Another opportunity is that despite their less advantageous position, women constitute a powerful community mobilization force. So I really think it's this thing about women it might be a challenge, but it's definitely an opportunity we need to look more into. On the challenge side, we see that not all religious actors are defenders of human rights, including women's rights. And it's a clear challenge that religious actors, and including women religious actors, actually convey messages contrary to universally acknowledged human rights. So this is something we need also to work on. I also wanted to mention one thing, which I've lived in Mali for some years. And I have a clear impression that many Malian Muslims, including imams, religious leaders, don't actually read the Quran, which was also mentioned here. But even the religious leaders often don't know Arabic and then have less access to the Quran. So we see this as a challenge because it makes people vulnerable for propaganda about what Islam is and isn't. So I think we see a role for us to contribute to looking into the Quran, what is actually said about women's rights, for example. Yes, but now I have exceeded my time limits.
Thank you very much. And apologies for being so strict, but we have quite a few people today, so I've had to try to manage it a little bit tougher than usual. I'm going to go straight over to Helge. The floor is yours.
Yes, many thanks for the invitation, and I give also many thanks to FAFO for this research. It's very important for development work and for actors in Mali to know this, so keep up the good work and keep up the support for FAFO, because I think this kind of research is very important. I represent the North Sahel, which is a quite new organization. We have just now started also a study in Mali, a randomized study of newborn in the district of Kati, health district of Kati. We have managed to start that with support from Lærdal and Kavli Fund. We are also doing a HPB newborn project in Mali, and also a small women and girl education project. So we have succeeded in doing projects in Mali, even though the security situation is like it is today. But now over to this. For 5 years ago, it was no extremism in Mali. For 3 years ago, you might say. And so this is totally new, the extremism we now see in the northern part of Mali. So I want to draw a little bit line back to when I was in the beginning of the 2000s. I lived almost 10 years in Mali myself, and I learned when I was living in the border with Mali and Guinea. I learned dialogue from the Catholic fathers, which I lived among at that time. And there it was two Muslim society. It was one normal society, and it was one Wahhabist at that time in that village. And what the Catholic father said, he said, he learned me everything about dialogue. I didn't know about that before, which it has almost become my work today. But he said, you must do dialogue with the normal Muslims, and you must do even more dialogue with the Wahhabists. And I learned to know them already at that time, and they were quite nice. I was a little bit scared. But then I saw how he was, and then this dialogue was so important for me in all my work. And the imam living in my village, he became a very good friend of mine. And I remember each time I came, he started with the same sentence. We are all descendants of Adam and Eva. You might say that I was a little bit tired about this sentence. I wasn't. It was so good. He was so dialogue-oriented and so peacefully. And he really, and I think this is one of the things we must, as development actor, must have very much in mind. And now we see it is changes taking place. This dialogue-oriented attitude is so important now in doing all kind of works, also for foreign ministry, and doing all kind of political activities. We see that I don't see very much change in mentality, but you see now with the crisis that it's I will highlight some points that is under pressure, and that is women education and FGM. I don't have the time to go into women education, but it's more vulnerable now than before. But FGM, I will say, that I've seen myself in this work we have done now with the health district of Kati. there they say that no, there is still 97%, and there is no actor, and there is almost no actor doing this, and it's a little bit behind now. So FGM has really been more vulnerable, but it's still possible to do, but then with very good dialogue with Muslim leaders. I could have said a lot about this, but I will return to this dialogue attitude. I think Nelson Mandela is one of one of the Africans that really have shown us the way there. He was driven by this dialogue in all he was doing. And the art of listening and speaking to others. The art of getting others to listen and speak to each other. And when we founded Northside as well in 2013, we were Christian, but we were also Muslims. And we decided that we will be, one of the important things for us is to be religious neutral. Because I don't think that Christian organization can still work in Mali, but I think that we need to be we need to have this dialogue attitude in all we do. I've also seen that in the work I've been doing here in Norway when it comes to dialogue and reconciliation projects to prevent radicalization. But if it's Christians there who is coming, the Muslims are asking, are they dialogue oriented? So, but I think the ministry, I will give, also Mali is still one of the poorest countries in the world. We can still do activities there. Let us do it, but with dialogue and with respect for others, and to listen to others, and then we can still do a lot of things in Mali, and we can change also things there still. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And straight over to Øyvind Aadland from Strømmen.
First of all, thank you very much for including us in this panel, and also thank you for including us in the list of participants in working in Mali from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of course, we are often asked what kind of religious animal is Strømme Foundation. We are not a mission agency. We are driven by Christian faith, so we are a faith-based and value-based international development agency. I would also like to express my gratitude and also appreciation of the research summary. I really feel that this is actually, in a way, summing up some of the views that we have sensed, but here with some empiric data, you are really presenting a very important piece of work. Secondly, it also kind of confirms the importance of a holistic approach. I think there has been a tendency of underestimating the religious value and the supernatural worldview in the countries in which we work. And this is a very good contribution towards that discussion. We are a civic society, civil society organization. And we are very decentralized. We have no Norwegians outside Norway. We are very based on capacity building in our regional offices and also with our partners, which means that I think we do have a strength that those operating, working in the civil society, they are people from the local communities. And this, I think, has given us an advantage of really underlining this is really complex. This is really difficult. And I am very humble when it comes to how do we approach. And I think one of the most important issues for us is to avoid polarization, to have that sensitivity of what is going on. And I caught a very interesting point in your research, which has been confirmed in our practices, protection of moral issues derives from across the board of Muslim leaders. Then we have something in common. We want to strengthen moral. We want to be doing good for the community. I think that these communities also have that. They want to do something good. And for me, one of the greatest experiences, in particular in West Africa, is to sit around the table with Muslim partners and to do something good together. I think that today there is an openness also to include women, and we have to be very careful in that dialogue so that we can build confidence. I think this is an issue of confidence in order to make polarization less. And I have been sitting under the, I would say pulpit from my background, but under the cathedra of a mullah, since we were participating in bringing in some literacy and arithmetic into their school. That built a piece of confidence that could go a long way. So I am very happy for this contribution. I think we have a lot to learn, and this is complex, and we have to find our way building confidence, taking on what we have in common, and then I think in the civil society there is definitely a role to play. Yeah, this is too short, but at least I indicated something.
In terms of timing, it was perfect. We've gone beyond our time, and so I would like to, first of all, thank all of the panelists, the comments that we've received. So if we could give them a hand. And to release you, because we have a very strict rule about our FAFO breakfast, which is that at 9:45 it's over. But because Professor Kulabia has come from so far away, I'd like to give him a few minutes to react to what he's heard this morning. But if you do have to leave, please feel free. But Professor, the floor is yours for a few minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate what they said, and I'm very impressed that they have already experience from Mali, and I met somebody who speaks Bambara, so it's so interesting for me. And I have been very encouraged to continue with what we are doing with FAFO. I think this is the second round we had a common project in Mali, and I hope we will continue even with religion revival and beyond, because people talk about the challenge of education. And I would like to say something about it, because I'm a little confused, because even people well educated, they are still so much involved in religion issues, and they are not, or they cannot be objective when they are dealing with religion. So I think that we have interest in religion matters, so it's not easy for researchers to be out of the subject and to analyze it very objectively, so you can bring finding to people who are working in civil society, who are working with the community, and so on and so forth. So I'm very happy that they are ready to help us, and we are ready to continue to work with Marianne. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for staying. Thanks again.